Don't settle for a fake snarler when you can have Beard Brothers' premium range of all-natural sausages. Proudly New Zealand made, you'll find them fresh in your local Foursquare, New World and Pack and Save. Beard Brothers, crafted with care, the old school way.
There's a story that's this morning that, things you don't think of, you see. But there are calls, this is in New Zealand, so this isn't a UK or a Europe or an America story, this is a New Zealand story. Calls for serial sperm donor crackdown. Legislation introducing rules to combat sperm overdonation is a good first step towards improving fertility services, but doesn't go far enough, according to those involved in fertilisation issues. Currently, the law requires providers of these services to keep track of donor offspring births and notify the Registrar General, but the amendment will allow the Registrar General to inform a fertility provider of the total number of donor offspring births recorded for a donor if asked. This will help to prevent overdonation and the ability for donors keen to overdonate from going to multiple clinics. Oh, for God's sake. All right, and this is just on, nothing to do with Craig, but, just, God, the things you think of. There were things that the government's got to intervene in. And imagine that going through Parliament. We have to bring in a new law to stop people donating at multiple sperm banks. Apparently the risk is incest. It's all due to some Dutch case where some mad doctor impregnated something like 5,000 or 6,000 people through sperm donations. Well, it's one way, I guess, of populating the world in your image. Anyhow, I'm sure he has never had the thought of himself. It is 25 to 12. Craig Stobo joins us now. Isn't that an odd story, Craig?
Yeah, listening to your commentary, and good morning to you and your listeners. I don't even know what overdonate means, assuming there's some equilibrium donation. I mean, how do you judge that?
I don't know. It's
I don't know.
just odd. Anyhow, all right. Now, you, Craig, might have heard or not our previous guest from the Taxpayers Union on Labour's capital gains tax. It's taken on a bit of a fillip this morning, a political one, and that Chris Hipkins has had a go at Chris Luxton for flipping, I think, 3 homes, or not flipping them, but selling them in 2024 last year, and making about $600,000 or $700,000 worth of tax-free profit from those particular things. For a lot of people, Craig, that pisses people off, I have to say. That rich people can do that and not be taxed while they are taxed for almost everything that they do. Do you think there is the politics of resentment and envy in Labour's capital gains tax?
Possibly. The question I've got really is around design principles. So the politics, just leave that to one side for a moment, but the design principles are quite important here. So the proposal is a very narrow, well, they say targeted capital gains tax by way of sale on commercial and residential property, and somehow it's twinned with 3 free visits to a doctor for everybody.
Yeah.
On the latter point, according to the Royal Society, there are around 6,000 practitioners in New Zealand and 83 million visits per annum. So if you added on 3 visits, assuming that they were extra and used and not substitutes, how do you find the doctors? As of last year, there were 485 doctors short identified by the Royal Society. So I don't know how you address, if everyone used those 3 vouchers, 3 visits, how the system would cope, and what use is a medical voucher to go to the doctor when I really want to go to the osteopath or the podiatrist or the dentist. So that's the one side of the question, the design questions. The other one is just the narrow nature of the capital gains tax proposed and these issues that come up around boundaries. So if you have a low rate, broad tax with no exemptions like GST, it's really easy, it's straightforward, there's no intervention.
Mm.
If you bring in a narrow capital gains tax like this one on the sale of a commercial or residential property, you start raising questions around boundaries and definitions. So if I exempt a farm from this, well, what's a farm? Is a farm a home with a single row of vines that sells grapes? A hobby farm. What is a residential home if it's attached to a dairy or sits above my office? That's a commercial. Is it commercial or residential? So that's the boundary issues are phenomenally difficult to manage and requires some sort of bureaucratic rules, which just lends itself to tax design. And if family homes are left out, then the market will just say, well, I'll just buy a bigger family home because it's capital gains tax exempt. And so you get these perverse behaviours, which are just consequences of design issues. The other exemptions are for KiwiSaver. So if property is not, if commercial property is going to be taxed, but not in KiwiSaver, well then, can you get exposure to commercial property through KiwiSaver that doesn't have the capital gains tax imposed? Or if it's not shares, then I'll own shares in my residential or commercial property, and that's exempt. So you go down this awful route of trying to understand exactly the practical issues of a very narrow tax with those boundaries that can get shifted very easily by clever tax design or practitioners or legal advisors. And then there's the inheritance piece. So all of the above commercial and residential potentially are exempt if it is included in inheritance. So I'll just set up a trust so that all the assets are transferred to kids and through time. So,
Well, can I ask a question of you then?
I
I'm
just
glad you've
don't think
mentioned
these things
KiwiSaver.
through.
Craig, I don't have a KiwiSaver account, so I don't know. My children do, but I don't. Um, so when you're talking about KiwiSaver, you're talking about you go and they invest money into the market on a variety of risk profiles. I make money, it's added to my KiwiSaver. Yeah. So is that
Yeah.
currently tax exempt? The amount of money
No,
that they
it has
make?
no, so KiwiSaver, like all managed fund schemes, collective investment vehicles, have a portfolio investment entity tax regime, which I helped design with Finance Minister Cullen way back at the turn of the century.
Yeah.
And that's designed to have a cap rate of 28 cents on income that's deducted in the fund itself. And there is no, the capital gains tax issues were explicitly avoided by way of appreciation of shares in those funds. So it doesn't have that characteristic. My point around KiwiSaver was if I invest in commercial property directly in KiwiSaver, under Labor's policy, is the KiwiSaver scheme overall exempt from that capital issue with the property that it holds? So you just don't know. But I think the idea of floating the concepts, rolling out policy, great. We can then try and understand what that actually means. But when it's a narrow tax like this, they call it targeted. It's a narrow tax, and you have these boundary issues. It just creates opportunities for tax planning, wealth management, etc., for people who have the means of doing that, and potentially penalises mum and dad who are simply running a dairy with a house on top, and they're caught by the regime. I don't know that necessarily is what they were aiming to do. So and then twinning it directly with a health outcome is a bit like, well, let's try and allocate funds from a part of our GST collection for the Defence Force or for the judiciary. That's not how our tax collection and expenditure system works. All the tax comes into a pot, and from that pot we make decisions, or the parliamentarians make decisions on what money that's spent on. So it's quite a diversion from traditional practice. No harm in challenging the system, but you've got to think through all the design principles ahead of time before people start asking the question, well, is this a good thing in the first place?
Mm. I'm interested as to the kind of advice or the kind of way that this has been designed. And you know that any tax policy is always going to be influenced by politics. I mean, that's the environment in which you're delivering it. If you, well, given your experience of both politics and of economics, and as you quite rightly remind us, you were involved in advising on tax regimes for previous governments. If you were advising the Labour Party on a capital gains tax that wasn't going to piss people off, would you just have said it's all capital gains bar the family home, which seems to be something that New Zealanders can live with from the polls that I've seen anyhow? Or would you say don't go down the capital gains tax route at all? Or would you say there are no exemptions, off you go? What would your advice be?
Yeah.
Don't settle for a fake snarler when you can have Beard Brothers' premium range of all-natural sausages. Proudly New Zealand made, you'll find them fresh in your local Foursquare, New World and Pack and Save. Beard Brothers, crafted with care the old school way.